Hello, my twisted friends. If you're new here, hi. My name is Shannon Page, and I'd like to welcome you to Tuesday's Twisted Tales. If you are interested and intrigued by true crime like I am, well, I'd recommend hitting that like and subscribe button to join me on Tuesdays for another Twisted Tale. Today's story is that of nightmares, so before we begin, I need to give you a sensitive material warning. This episode is graphic in nature. It has child abuse, child neglect, harsh language, and murder. It may be triggering to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Today we are getting into another Arizona case that rocked the city to its core. The story made the likes of some serial killers look like amateurs. Today we're getting into the awful, twisted tale of Shawn Ryan Grell, the awful man that set his 2-year-old daughter, Kristen, on fire in the desert in 1999. It was a story no one would ever forget, so let's get started. Shawn Ryan Grell was born February 17, 1975, and he had a terrible, troubled childhood. He was just one of those kids that grew up hard, and he was mean, real aggressive. He killed his family's cat, he set fire to the family dog, and if that wasn't enough, he burned down the house that he and his family lived in. We're off to a real good start now, aren't we? Well, it doesn't get any better. In 1988, when he was just 13, police arrested Shawn Grell after he fondled a young girl. I guess he had touched her breast or something. Anyway, as a result, Grell was sent to juvenile facility, but this didn't seem to straighten him out any because he continued to get in trouble. Now, the reported incidents that I could find said that he was assaulting the staff and other inmates, which earned him a reputation for being an unstable kid whose, quote, assultiveness, end quote, is that even a damn word, assultiveness? Anyways, needed to be controlled. He was eventually tested and was diagnosed as a, quote, borderline retard, end quote. I shit you not. That is how the report reads. I'm not calling him a retard, okay? Anyway, he also has a real low IQ, somewhere between 70 and 80. So this guy isn't real smart. Below average for sure. Now, Grell had a rough home life, but it seems like he brought most of it, if not all of it, on himself. He spent the rest of his teenage years bouncing in and out of juvenile facilities, committing all sorts of crimes along the way, like disorderly conduct, shoplifting, and assault. This guy's a mess from day one, it sounds like, but it's still hard to imagine that he did what he did. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So things don't improve for Shawn Grell after his 18th birthday. By 1992, he was convicted of assault and was sent to prison. In 1995, he was back in jail for robbing a convenience store. Grell was granted parole, but his parole officer soon violated him when he was caught with drug paraphernalia in 1998. Grell was out of prison for about 3 years and on parole, but somehow found himself a steady girlfriend. Her name was Amber Salem. Now, he proposed to Amber in 1998, and she accepted. The couple had already had a child together, a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl that they named Kristen. She was born in 1997, so getting married sounded like the next best thing to do, right? Well, anyway, Kristen, she was a happy, well-adjusted little girl in the winter of 1999. All three, Shawn, Amber, and little Kristen, they had moved into Amber's parents' home by the time that Shawn violated his parole again and was sent back to prison. It's real unfortunate that this guy didn't get put away for life at this point. I mean, it's pretty clear that this dude is never going to get his act together. Anyway, Shawn Grell was released in 1999. He tried to walk the straight and narrow, but his criminal record made it difficult for him to do so. Because of his felony convictions, companies would either not hire him at all due to his record, or he would lie to them about his record, and when the employee background check would come back, they'd end up firing him in a couple of months after his background check was sent back to the employers. So he's not only having trouble getting a job, once he gets one, he isn't able to hold on to it for very long. And I can see how this might be frustrating and make a person a little pissed off, but there are programs for felons to help find work, Apparently, he didn't know this, or he just didn't give a shit. Anyway, his inability to remain employed caused a lot of conflict in the home, especially between Shawn and Amber's parents, because they're all living with Amber's family, remember? Okay, so Shawn, he did eventually find a job, but on November 29th, 1999, Shawn left work early, claiming that he needed to be at his girlfriend's house. He never returned to work, so he finally gets a job, and then he pulls this little stunt. He spent the next few days at the house just drinking and pondering life and how unfair it all is, feeling sorry for himself. Well, Shawn, he was at home December 2nd, 1992, and his girlfriend's mother found out that he lost his job again. So Amber, the girlfriend, she called to meet Shawn for lunch. So Shawn, he cashed his last paycheck, put in some job applications at Desert Sky Mall, and met Amber outside the food court. Now she told him how upset her parents were and that they were, threatening to throw him out of the family home. So when Amber returned to work, Shawn, he bought a 32-ounce bottle of beer and drank in the car. He went to a bar in Phoenix, then came back and met Amber for her break about 2:45 in the afternoon. After that, he decided to pick up 2-year-old Kristen and drive out to visit his sister to look at Christmas lights. When he got to the daycare to get little Kristen, he checked her out, but he signed Amber's name like, I don't know, like they wouldn't notice that it was him picking her up or something. What the hell? Anyway, that afternoon, Shawn drove to Mesa with little Kristen. At about 5:40 p.m., he stopped at a convenience store to purchase beer and a sports drink. About an hour later, Shawn bought a red plastic gas container at a department store in Mesa. He continued to drive around before stopping at a convenience store where he bought just over a gallon of gas. Later that evening, Shawn entered another convenience store in Apache Junction, but he didn't buy anything. He just walked around and left. What the hell? Shawn then drove to a remote area near Apache Junction. He took his sleeping daughter Kristen out of the car, laid her on the ground in a ditch that was about 15 feet from the road. Kristen woke up as her father poured that gasoline he bought over her. He then lit a single match and threw it on her, setting her on fire. Jesus. Kristen stumbled around, walking about 12 feet before she fell to her knees, collapsing face down in the dirt. She died from smoke inhalation and severe burns covering 98% of her body. The only part of her body that was not burned were the bottom of her feet. After watching Kristen fall to her knees, Shawn Grell, he returned to his car and drove around for a little while before returning to see if his daughter's burning body had gone out. He then went back to one of the convenience stores he'd gone to earlier and bought more beer. It was reported that he told the employee at the cash register that, quote, he had just seen some kids light a dog on fire in the desert, end quote. He continued to say, quote, I can't believe that kids would set a dog on fire. This is what the world is coming to when kids set dogs on fire, end quote. For several hours, Shawn drove around the city drinking more beer. Just before midnight, a police officer pulled him over on a suspicion of driving under the influence. I guess he was swerving a little bit on the road there and caught the officer's attention. Well, once stopped, Shawn handed the officer the bottle of beer that he had been drinking. The officer didn't arrest Shawn, though. In fact, the officer released Shawn to walk home. What the hell? Seriously? He should have hauled his ass in on DUI charges, right? Well, since he wasn't taken in, Shawn, he returned to his car after the police officer left and continued driving around. At around 2 in the morning, another Phoenix police officer stopped Shawn. This time the officer arrested him and took him to the police station, where a breathalyzer test confirmed that he had a blood alcohol content of approximately 0.16. After processing him, the officer released him and a taxi cab took Grell to 3rd Avenue in Van Buren. Seriously, what the hell is happening here? I hate this story. From there, Shawn walked to the state capitol and used a call box to telephone the police department. He told the police several times that he had killed his daughter and let them know where to find her body. After confirming that an infant's body was found where Shawn indicated it would be, the police arrested him on suspicion of murder. At the scene, the police found Kristen's badly burned and lifeless body and tire tracks that matched the tires on the car Shawn was driving that day. Large and small shoe imprints in the dirt that were consistent with the shoes that Shawn and little Kristen were wearing, and a book of matches with a single match missing. They also found some partially burned candy, a melted hair clip, and articles of partially burned clothing. Police recovered the red plastic gas container that appeared to be new and still contained a small amount of gas in it. Shawn's fingerprints were found on the gas can. Investigators noted several areas of burnt soil from where little Kristen had walked towards her dad for help. What the actual fuck? And a strong smell of gas still filled the desert air. I don't know how these officers didn't cause this dude some harm. I can't even imagine the hell that they were all in while working this scene. This dude is pure damn evil. Now, Kristen's body was found face down. Her clothes, hair, and body were badly burned. The autopsy revealed that she suffered 3rd and 4th degree burns over 98% of her body. And according to the lead detective, the position of Kristen's body and the burn patterns on her clothes and body, as well as the burn patterns on the ground near her body, were all consistent with Kristen having had gasoline poured on her body and then being lit on fire, just as Shawn had said. Kristen's death resulted from thermal injuries and smoke inhalation, according to the autopsy. Several months after his arrest, Shawn signed a, quote, prisoner media waiver, end quote, informing him that, quote, statements made to reporters, news persons, and other members of the media may be used against you in court, end quote. Shawn then held a news conference where he admitted killing his daughter. At this news conference, of course that's being recorded, Shawn stated, quote, we, speaking about him and Kristen, quote, we had gone to Mesa, went to Mesa. I was going to see my sister's house, but I decided not to. I decided to go to the store and get a few beers and to go drinking and drive around in the car. Took Kristen to McDonald's, then we just cruised around a little bit more. And I decided that I was going to go ahead and do it. I went to the gas station to get the stuff and drove around, trying to find a place where I could do it, end quote. Jesus, what the fuck? Now, during the press conference, Shawn also said that Kristen woke up when he poured the gas on her, and she stood up when he lit the match and threw it at her. What the hell? 3 weeks later, Shawn sent a letter to the prosecutor stating, quote, I took my daughter's life away from her on December 2nd, 1999 in a very sickening way, end quote. In the letter, Shawn also stated several times that he was guilty. Police investigators confirmed that the handwriting on the April 21st letter matched Shawn's handwriting. I honestly think they were letting this guy do whatever he wanted with letters and media because it was all going to be used against him in court, right? I think they were allowing all of this nonsense to seal his fate. You know that saying, if you give them enough rope, they'll hang themselves? I think that's what's happening here. But who knows? Anyway, all I know is that when this shit was on TV all day, every day for what seemed like forever, I had the same reaction every single time. There just aren't enough words to describe the anger or hatred towards this guy. It was horrific and you couldn't escape it. It was absolutely awful. I was pregnant with my daughter at the time and just couldn't wrap my head around this. Like, here I am, excited to have a little girl join our family in just a couple of months, and this piece of shit just lit his baby girl on fucking fire. It was awful. Anyway, while speaking with his attorneys, Shawn elected to avoid a jury trial, and the parties submitted the case to the trial court based on stipulated facts. The court found Shawn guilty of first-degree murder. At the sentencing hearing, the court concluded that the state had proved beyond a reasonable doubt the existence of 3 aggravating factors. 1, a prior conviction for serious offense, felony. 2, the heinous, cruel, and depraved manner of the murder, felony. And 3, the victim was less than 15 years old, felony. Finding no mitigating circumstances sufficiently substantial to call for leniency, the court sentenced Shawn Grell to death. And I'd love to say this is the end of this fucked up story, but it's not. Shawn Grell just kept talking to anyone that would listen, and every news outlet was listening. So brace yourself, this is not going to be good for any of us moving forward. Shawn breaks down how he did all this bullshit, and he says, quote, I picked up Kristen at the daycare, then took her to McDonald's for a hamburger. We ate in an apartment complex parking lot, then cruised around for a while looking at Christmas displays, end quote. Now he goes on to say, quote, Kristen started whining. I just got tired of it and slapped her in the mouth. After she stopped crying a few minutes later, she said, sorry, Daddy. And then she started being good. And then she just went nuts again because she wanted to see her mom again, end quote. Shawn continued saying, quote, I took Kristen to the Target store and got a red plastic 3-gallon gas jug for $4. I filled it at a gas station, then we drove around the desert for about 45 minutes until I found a ditch on the side of the road. Kristen was finally asleep, so I got out of the car, then I picked her up out of the car. I said, Kristen, Mommy's here, let's lay down. So I laid her in the dirt next to the car. I took the gasoline and poured it on her. I took a match and threw it on her. She screamed, no, Daddy, no. But that didn't stop me. I drove back and forth for a while until the flames went out. Then I walked over and just looked at her, end quote. Jesus. Oh my God. There is a real special place in hell for this guy. You talk about evil, you wonder what it looks like. Well, it looks like this. During the trial, Detective Donald Walsh of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office testified in court that, quote, Kristen was lying on the ground when the blaze began on the front of her body. She got up and ran about 12 feet, walking in circles at one point as the flames spread upwards to her face. The heat was so intense that a barrette on the left side of her head melted. The plastic ran down her face. She finally collapsed, face first, in a ditch and died, end quote. Oh my God. I cannot imagine what those officers saw that day. Now, Judge Barbara Jarrett had sat on the bench for a little over 12 years when this case landed in her courtroom. During her career, she presided over many cases where capital punishment was an option, but she never found cause to use it until she heard the case of Shawn Ryan Grell. And on July 9, 2001, one of her last acts before she retired was to sentence this piece of shit, Shawn Ryan Grell, to death. I again wish that this was the end of this god-awful tale, but it's not. On June 6, 2006, the Arizona Supreme Court unanimously decided that Shawn Grell did not give up his right to a jury sentencing when he waived his right to a jury trial in 2000. His death sentence was vacated, and it was ordered that a new sentencing hearing be held. At the center of the issue is whether the trial court erred by failing to find that Shawn Grell was, quote, mentally retarded, end quote, and appropriately weighing the factor in mitigation of his sentence, and whether the execution of a, quote, mentally retarded, end quote, person violates the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. What the hell? Seriously, cruel and unusual punishment, huh? Like what he did was not cruel and unusual punishment to his 2-year-old daughter? I swear some of these laws and loopholes are total bullshit. I'm an eye for an eye type of gal. They should have done to him what he did to Kristen. Anyway, the long and short of the story in this case is this. Shawn threw himself at the mercy of the court in 2009, with his defense fighting that his death penalty be overturned, stating that Shawn was, quote, mentally retarded, end quote, and that it would be inhumane to put him to death. What the hell? July 27, 2009, 8 years after a judge sentenced Shawn Ryan Grell to death for murdering his 2-year-old daughter, a jury reached the same conclusion and ordered that he die by lethal injection. Good for them. Now, Kristen's mother, Amber, she cried and hugged her mother when the verdict was read. Kristen's grandmother said, quote, it's been a long 10 years, but worth the wait, end quote. But Shawn Grell's defense attorney, Gary, said he's still hoping that the state Supreme Court will reduce Shawn Grell's sentence to life in prison, saying, quote, you can't have a procedure where you execute the retarded. He's been diagnosed as retarded since first grade, end quote. This case would change the law in Arizona when it comes to the death penalty. The nation's highest court ruled that only jurors, not judges, can determine aggravating factors that qualify defendants for a death sentence. The U.S. Supreme Court also ruled that it was unconstitutional to execute the mentally retarded. In 2013, the Arizona Supreme Court unanimously ruled that Shawn had mental retardation and by federal law could not be executed. When this was announced, Shawn's attorney, Gary, said, quote, Shawn suffered from a cognitive disorder that leaves him unable to control his impulses, end quote. But prosecutor Kristen Hoffmeyer, she said, quote, the only penalty that fits this crime is that he spend the rest of his days sitting on death row. Justice demands nothing less, end quote. Although Shawn's sentence was no longer spent on death row, death did come for him on April 19, 2025. He died in his Tucson prison cell of cancer. Good damn riddance, I say. To date, this murder remains the most heinous act ever committed in the state of Arizona. I know it's one that I've never forgotten, but I wish I could. Such a tragic story. And that, my twisted friends, is the real fucked up, twisted tale of Shawn Ryan Grell. I have no words of wisdom or advice to offer after this one. I don't know if I agree with the law changes on execution for the, quote, mentally retarded, end quote, or not. On one hand, I get it, but then this case comes along and it wouldn't have bothered me at all if he had been put down like the animal he was. So I don't know, but I'd love to hear what you think about it, so leave those thoughts in the comments below. Also, let me know who you'd like to hear about next. This one was requested by another great friend of mine, Bobby. So it's all his fault that we're all twisted up this week. Y'all be safe out there. Take care of yourselves. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button to join me on Tuesdays for another Twisted Tale. And I'll see y'all next week. Bye-bye.